Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm inside me. Harold's funeral had barely ended, the echoes of Amazing Grace still faint in my ears, when Susan and David started in. "Mom, you can't stay in that big house alone," Susan said, her voice soft, but her eyes hard. David nodded, his hand resting a little too possessively on her arm. "It's too much to manage, Margaret," he added, that patronizing tone he always used when discussing practical matters. The upkeep, the garden, it's a burden. I looked around the living room, at the familiar furniture, the photos of Harold, and me smiling back from the mantelpiece. This house held a lifetime of memories, of laughter and love. It was my sanctuary, the place where I felt closest to Harold. "I managed just fine," I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. "We're just worried about you," Susan said, her voice laced with what I now recognize as fake concern. "A smaller place, closer to us, would be so much easier," David chimed in. "An apartment, perhaps, something modern, low maintenance." He gestured vaguely towards the window. "Think about it, Margaret. No more lawn to mow, no more gutters to clean." He actually shuddered dramatically. I sipped my lukewarm tea, the bitter taste clinging to my tongue. Their concern felt off, like they were circling a wounded animal, waiting for it to collapse. The conversation continued in this vein for another hour, each carefully worded suggestion chipping away at my resolve. They painted a picture of me frail and incompetent, unable to care for myself or my home. "We're only thinking of your best interests, Mom," Susan repeated, squeezing my hand. Her touch felt cold. "Imagine cozy evenings with us, Sunday dinners together. We could help you unpack, get settled." David smiled, a flash of something I couldn't quite place in his eyes. "We'd be right there to assist, wouldn't we, Susan?" he said. Susan beamed at him. "Of course, darling. We want Mom to be happy and safe." Their words were like a swarm of bees, buzzing incessantly, making it hard to think clearly. I felt overwhelmed, exhausted by the day's events and their relentless pressure. I don't know," I stammered, feeling the familiar pang of grief twisting in my gut. Harold would have known what to say, how to handle this. He always had a way of cutting through the fog, seeing things clearly. Now, I felt lost at sea, adrift without his anchor. "Don't rush into a decision, Mom," Susan said, a little too quickly. David, however, couldn't quite contain his eagerness. "But the sooner the better, wouldn't you say, Margaret? The market is volatile, and who knows how long these low interest rates will last." He picked up a brochure from the coffee table, a glossy image of a sterile-looking apartment complex. "Look at this place, Susan. Indoor pool, fitness center perfect for Margaret." He flipped through the pages, pointing out various amenities I had no interest in. "We could even help you find a nice, compact unit on the ground floor. No stairs to worry about." The implication hung heavy in the air. I was old, I was a burden, and I needed to be taken care of. My hands trembled as I reached for another cup of tea, spilling some in the saucer. I'll think about it," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. They exchanged a look, a quick, almost imperceptible glance that spoke volumes. I saw it, though a flicker of triumph masked by concern. They thought they had me. They thought they had won. They left shortly after, promising to call again soon. As the front door closed behind them, the silence of the house pressed in on me. I stood by the window, watching the rain cascade down the glass, blurring the streetlights into hazy halos. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, and I sank into Harold's favorite armchair, the worn leather cool against my skin. I picked up a framed photo of us from the side table, my fingers tracing the lines of his smiling face. "Oh, Harold," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "What am I going to do?" Then something shifted within me. The grief remained, a dull ache in my chest, but a new emotion began to take root. Anger. A slow, simmering anger at their presumption, their manipulation, their thinly veiled greed. I thought about their insistence on me moving, their eagerness to help me downsize. Something wasn't right. It felt calculated. I reached for my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Susan was always posting about her life on social media. It was a habit that used to annoy Harold, but he'd indulged her nonetheless. He always said, "Let the girl have her fun." Now, that fun might just be my saving grace. With a deep breath, I typed Susan's name into the search bar. What I found would change everything, and it would be the first step in reclaiming what was rightfully mine. This house, my memories, my future. They wouldn't get away with this. Not while I still had a breath left in me. This was only the beginning. Rain lashed against the window of my small apartment, mirroring the storm inside me. Just weeks ago, I was in my comfortable family home, surrounded by memories of Harold. Now, I sat amidst unpacked boxes, the silence broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a clock I hadn't yet found a place for. It was a stark contrast to the bustling life I'd known, a life that had been so carelessly dismantled. Susan and David had been so insistent. "Mom, it's too big for you now," Susan had said, her voice laced with what I'd mistakenly interpreted as concern. "Selling the house is the practical thing to do, David." Ever the pragmatist, had chimed in. "Think of the upkeep, Margaret. Downsizing will make things so much easier." Easier for whom? I now wondered, a bitter taste rising in my throat. Easier for them to get their hands on the money. That's what. I picked up a framed photo of Harold and me taken on our last anniversary. His warm smile felt like a physical ache in my chest. He'd worked so hard for that house, pouring his life savings into creating a home for us. "We'll grow old here, Margaret," he'd promised, his hand clasped in mine. Now, it was just a memory traded for this cramped, impersonal space. I'd been so naive, so trusting. I'd believed their lies about needing financial help, about David's business struggling. They'd painted such a convincing picture of hardship, even shedding a few crocodile tears. I sifted through a box of kitchen utensils, the mundane task a distraction from the gnawing anxiety. A sudden buzzing from my phone startled me. It was an email notification from my bank, confirming the final transfer of funds from the house sale. The number stared back at me, a stark reminder of what I'd lost. I closed my eyes, trying to push down the wave of nausea. How could they do this to me, to their own family? I forced myself to unpack, the rhythmic clinking of plates a small comfort in the echoing silence. The apartment felt cold, despite the central heating. It lacked the warmth, the history. the love that had filled every corner of my old home. As I hung a painting in the living room, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I sank into the nearest chair, my head in my hands. What was I going to do? How could I rebuild my life from this wreckage? The silence was broken by another buzz from my phone. This time, it was a Facebook notification. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something compelled me to check. It was a photo tagged by Susan. My heart sank as I clicked on it. The picture showed Susan and David, beaming, on a pristine white beach, cocktails in hand. The caption read, "Living our best life. Thanks to Mom's generosity, we're finally enjoying the vacation we've always dreamed of. Blessed family paradise." My breath caught in my throat. Paradise, generosity. My blood ran cold. The beach, the cocktails, the blatant lie, it was all too much. This wasn't a struggling business. This was a lavish getaway funded by my life savings, the money Harold and I had worked so hard for. My hands trembled as I scrolled through more photos, each one a fresh stab to the heart. A new luxury car, designer clothes, expensive jewelry, all purchased with the money they'd swindled from me. The comments section was filled with congratulations and envious remarks from their friends. "So lucky to have such a generous mom." One comment read, a surge of anger, hotter than anything I'd ever felt, coursed through me. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal, the blatant disregard for my feelings, for Harold's memory. They'd used my grief, my vulnerability, to line their own pockets. They'd robbed me not just of my home, but of my dignity. I sat there for a long time, the rain still pounding against the window, the silence of the apartment now heavy with a different kind of emptiness. The initial shock and despair slowly gave way to a steely resolve. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't let them win. Harold wouldn't want me to. I wiped away the tears that had unknowingly streamed down my face. I needed a plan. I needed to fight back. I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over the contacts. There was someone I needed to call, someone who could help me navigate this mess, someone who could help me get justice. The first tendrils of a plan, a seed of hope, began to take root in the desolate landscape of my despair. I might be down, but I wasn't out. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The flicker of a small, determined smile played on my lips as I dialed the number of an estate attorney I'd found online. "Hello," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "My name is Margaret Wilson, and I need your help." The rain continued to fall, but inside, a different kind of storm was brewing. Rain lashed against my tiny apartment window, blurring the city lights into a hazy, indistinct glow. A month. It had only been a month since I'd sold my house, the house John and I had built together, brick by brick, dream by dream. Now, here I sat, surrounded by boxes I hadn't the heart to unpack, feeling smaller and more lost than I ever thought possible. Susan and David, of course, had been so supportive. "It's too big for you now, Mom," Susan had said, her voice full of what I'd mistakenly taken for concern. "You'll be so much happier in a cozy little place, closer to us." David had chimed in with his usual practice smile. "We'll be able to see you all the time." That was the lie that stung the most, the one I replayed in my head as I stared out at the relentless downpour. I hadn't seen them since the day I signed the papers. We're just so busy settling into the new business, Mom, Susan had explained over the phone, her tone clipped. But we'll definitely be over for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving! A hollow laugh escaped my lips. Thanksgiving in this cramped, impersonal space, a pale imitation of the gatherings we used to have in my sun-drenched dining room, the table overflowing with food and laughter. I picked at the lukewarm tea in my chip mug, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me like a physical weight. The only sound was the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock John had painstakingly restored, its mournful chimes a constant reminder of everything I had lost. I knew I should unpack, try to make this place feel like home, but the thought filled me with a bone-deep weariness. What was the point? It wasn't home. It was a cage, gilded with their false concern and empty promises. I wandered into the small, sparsely furnished living room, my gaze settling on a framed photograph perched precariously on a stack of books. It was John and me, taken on our last anniversary trip to the coast. We were standing on a windswept cliff, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing, our faces alight with joy. A sob caught in my throat, the memories bittersweet and sharp. "Oh, John," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "What have I done?" The silence that followed felt deafening, broken only by the insistent drumming of the rain. I sank onto the worn sofa, the springs protesting beneath my weight, and closed my eyes, trying to block out the gnawing emptiness. I felt like a ship adrift at sea, lost in a fog of grief and confusion. Where had I gone wrong? How had I allowed myself to be so easily manipulated? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered, unresolved. The ringing of my phone startled me. It was Susan. "Mom," she began, her voice bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to the hollowness I felt inside. "David and I were thinking, why don't you come over for dinner tonight? We can catch up." I hesitated, a flicker of suspicion igniting within me. After weeks of silence, this sudden invitation felt off. "I don't know, Susan," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm not feeling very well." "Oh, come on, Mom," she persisted. "It'll do you good to get out of that apartment. And we have something to tell you. Something to tell me." Those words echoed in my ears, a warning bell sounding in the distance. What could they possibly want now? Against my better judgment, I agreed. Perhaps, I reasoned, I was being paranoid. Perhaps they genuinely wanted to see me. But as I hung up the phone, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. I showered and dressed, choosing a simple but elegant outfit, a remnant of my former life. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a stranger staring back at me, a woman hollowed out by grief and betrayal. The taxi ride to Susan and David's house was short but agonizing. Each street light that flashed past, each turn of the wheels, seemed to amplify the anxiety churning inside me. I tried to distract myself by looking out the window, but the city lights only blurred into a meaningless jumble of color. Finally, the taxi pulled up to their driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs as I paid the fare and stepped out onto the sidewalk. Their house, a sprawling two-story affair in a gated community, loomed before me, a stark reminder of the disparity between our lives. It was a house I could have easily afforded before, a house I would have loved to grow old in. Now, it stood as a symbol of their deception, a monument to their greed. I took a deep breath and walked towards the front door, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for the doorbell. As the chimes echoed inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. The door swung open, revealing David, his smile as wide and insincere as ever. "Mom," he exclaimed, ushering me inside. "So glad you could make it." Susan emerged from the kitchen, her face beaming. "Hi, Mom," she chirped, giving me a quick hug. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." The house was immaculate, everything in its place, a stark contrast to the chaos of my own small apartment. The aroma of roasting meat and spices filled the air, a tantalizing scent that did little to ease the knot in my stomach. As I followed them into the dining room, my eyes fell on something that made my blood run cold. There, in the center of the mahogany table, sat a silver centerpiece, gleaming under the soft light of the chandelier. It was my centerpiece, the one John had given me for our 25th wedding anniversary, the one I thought I had packed away with my other treasured possessions. Where did you get that?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Susan and David exchanged a quick glance, a flicker of unease crossing their faces. "Oh, this old thing," Susan said, her voice a little too casual. "We found it in one of the boxes you left behind. We thought it would look nice here." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, and in that moment, I knew that everything they had told me, every promise they had made, had been a lie. The knot in my stomach tightened, a cold, hard ball of anger and resolve forming in its place. The game, I realized, was far from over. Rain lashed against my apartment window, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. It had been months since I sold my house, the house my late husband and I had built together, brick by brick, dream by dream. Susan and David had been so insistent, so worried about me rattling around in such a big place. "It's just too much for you to manage on your own, Mom," Susan had said, her voice laced with what I then mistook for concern. Now, the cramped two-bedroom apartment felt less like a haven and more like a cage. Susan called again today. "Mom, we're in a bit of a bind," she began, her voice strained. "The car needs some major repairs, and David's hours have been cut back." My stomach tightened. This was the third emergency this month. First, it was the unexpected vet bill for their dog, Princess. Then, it was the leaky roof that needed immediate fixing. Now the car. "How much do you need, dear?" I asked, already knowing the answer would sting. "Well," Susan hesitated. "The mechanic said it's going to be around $5,000. $5,000? That was almost all I had left from the proceeds of the house sale. After helping them with the down payment on their starter home, a sprawling 4-bedroom with a pool, I later discovered through a casual mention on Facebook. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "All right, Susan, I'll transfer the money tomorrow." There was a pause, and I could almost hear the relief in her voice. "Oh, thank you, Mom. You're a lifesaver." The call ended quickly after that, leaving me staring at the rain-streaked window pane. A dull ache settled in my chest. I knew I shouldn't have sold the house. It was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a lifetime of memories, of laughter and love, a tangible connection to my husband. Now, it was gone, replaced by this gnawing emptiness, this constant worry about money. The next day, I trudged to the bank and wired the money to Susan. The teller, a kind young woman named Sarah, noticed my downcast expression. "Everything all right, Mrs. Wilson?" she asked gently. I managed a weak smile. "Just helping my daughter out," I replied. Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Family's important," she said. "It's good to have someone to lean on." Her words, meant to comfort, only amplified my loneliness. I was the one being leaned on, drained dry, until there was nothing left. Back in my apartment, the silence was oppressive. I flicked on the TV, hoping to distract myself. A cooking show blared brightly, showcasing a lavish Thanksgiving feast. Thanksgiving. It was only a few weeks away. Susan had always loved Thanksgiving at my house. The big gatherings, the overflowing table laden with food, the warmth and laughter that filled every corner. This year, they'd insisted on hosting it at their new house. "More space, Mom," Susan had said, her smile a little too bright. "We can really make it special." I picked up my phone and scrolled through Facebook, idly browsing through my newsfeed. Then I saw it, a picture, posted by David, of Susan beaming next to a brand new, gleaming red convertible. The caption read, "Early Thanksgiving gift for my amazing wife." Couldn't resist spoiling her a little. My blood ran cold. A convertible. $5,000. The car repairs. The vet bills. The leaky roof. It all clicked into place. A sickening realization that hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't needed the money for emergencies. They'd lied. They'd used me, my own daughter, and son-in-law had systematically drained my savings, leaving me with barely enough to scrape by, while they lived the high life, flaunting their ill-gotten gains on social media. The rain outside intensified, but I barely noticed. The storm inside me was raging, a tempest of anger, hurt, and a cold, hard resolve. They thought they could get away with it. They thought I was a naive old woman, easily manipulated. They were wrong. Thanksgiving was coming, and I had a plan. Rain lashed against my apartment window, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Months had passed since I'd sold my house, that beautiful old place filled with a lifetime of memories, all to help Susan and David, supposedly struggling after David's business downturn. I'd downsized, swallowing my pride and accepting their assurances that this was the best way for us all. "It's just temporary, Mom," Susan had said, squeezing my hand. "We'll get you back on your feet." David had nodded solemnly, adding, "We're a family. We take care of each other." Now, curled up on my small sofa, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. The muted glow of my laptop screen cast long shadows across the room, illuminating the source of my unease. Susan's Instagram feed. There they were, beaming, tanned, and radiating an infuriating level of contentment. Crystal clear turquoise water lapped at their feet as they posed on a pristine beach, cocktails in hand. Another photo showed David sporting a brand new, ostentatiously large watch. "Living our best life," Susan had captioned it, punctuated with a string of celebratory emojis. My breath hitched. This wasn't the frugal, belt-tightening existence they'd portrayed. This was opulence. My fingers trembled as I scrolled further. A new car, designer clothes, lavish dinners, the evidence mounted. Each image a fresh stab to my already wounded heart. They lied, I whispered, the words barely audible above the drumming rain. They lied to me. A cold, hard resolve began to solidify within me. The initial shock gave way to a quiet fury. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd found online earlier that day. The contact details of an estate attorney specializing in elder financial abuse. "Hello, Mrs. Wilson," a calm, professional voice answered. "Mr. Harrison speaking. How can I help you?" I explained my situation, the tremor in my voice betraying my emotional turmoil. He listened patiently, occasionally interjecting with clarifying questions. "I have documentation of the sale of my house, the transfer of funds to their account, and now this," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "These Instagram photos showcasing their blatant disregard for my sacrifice." "I understand, Mrs. Wilson," Mr. Harrison replied. "This is, unfortunately, more common than you think. Bring in all the documentation you have. We can explore several legal avenues, from demanding repayment to potentially pursuing a case of undue influence, or even fraud." Hope, a flicker at first, began to grow within me. Maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim what was rightfully mine. The next few days blurred into a flurry of activity. I gathered all the paperwork related to the house sale, bank statements showing the money transfers, and printed copies of Susan's Instagram posts. Each document felt like a small victory, a piece of the puzzle I was assembling to expose their deceit. Mr. Harrison, after reviewing everything, laid out my options. "We can send a demand letter outlining the deception and requesting full repayment," he explained. "If that doesn't work, we can proceed with legal action. I want them to understand the consequences of their actions," I said, my voice firm. "I want them to feel the weight of their betrayal." Mr. Harrison nodded. "We'll make sure they do." He began drafting the demand letter, meticulously detailing the financial transactions and highlighting Susan and David's extravagant spending habits as evidenced by their social media activity. I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since my husband's passing. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my dignity. As Thanksgiving approached, I received a call from Mr. Harrison. "They've responded," he said, his tone grave. "They deny any wrongdoing, claiming the money was a gift." My hands clenched. A gift. They had the audacity to call it a gift after the way they'd manipulated me, after the lies they'd spun about their supposed financial hardship. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice tight with anger. "We proceed," Mr. Harrison replied firmly. "We file the lawsuit." A strange sense of calm washed over me. I was ready. I had nothing left to lose. This Thanksgiving, I wouldn't be sharing a table with Susan and David, pretending everything was fine. This Thanksgiving, I would be serving them something far more substantial, a lawsuit. And I had a feeling it would be a dish best served cold. The thought brought a faint smile to my lips. The rain outside had stopped. The first rays of dawn were breaking through the clouds, illuminating the city with a soft, golden light. A new day was beginning, And for me, it was the dawn of a new era, an era of reclaiming what was mine. The muted gray of my apartment walls seemed to mock me. I picked up my phone, my hand trembling slightly. It felt heavy, like it held the weight of all my misplaced trust. I took a deep breath and dialed Susan's number. It rang 3 times before she answered, her voice bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. "Hi, Mom. How are you doing in your cozy new apartment?" Cozy. That's what they called it when they convinced me to sell my house. The house my husband and I had built together, brick by brick, memory by memory. They said downsizing would be good for me, less to worry about. Less to worry about, indeed. "I'm doing fine, dear," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I was just thinking about Thanksgiving. I know how much you and David love coming over for dinner, and I was wondering if you'd still like to come, even though I'm in a smaller place now." There was a pause, just a fraction of a second, but long enough for me to hear the gears turning in her head. "Oh, Mom, that's so sweet of you. But with the baby on the way, we were thinking of having a quiet Thanksgiving. Just the 2 of us this year. The baby." Another excuse. Another lie. I had seen the pictures on Instagram. The designer handbags, the weekend getaway to that fancy spa, the new car gleaming in their driveway. None of it screamed struggling young couple expecting a baby. "Oh, that's a shame," I said, my voice tinged with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. "I was so looking forward to seeing the new nursery you were setting up. David mentioned he was putting together a crib just last week, didn't he?" Another silence. This one longer. Yeah, eventually," Susan stammered. "We're still, figuring things out." "Of course, dear. Well, maybe you can send me some pictures then. I'd love to see how it's coming along." I ended the call before she could respond, a small, cold smile playing on my lips. The nursery. The crib lies, all lies. They hadn't spent a dime of my money on anything remotely baby-related. It was all there, plastered all over social media for the world to see the evidence of their deceit, their blatant disregard for my well-being. They thought I was old, senile, easily manipulated. They thought they could take everything I had worked for and leave me with nothing but scraps. They were wrong. I walked over to my small dining table, the one I had managed to salvage from my old life, and opened my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for the number I had written down earlier that day. "Mr. Thompson. This state attorney. Hello, Mr. Thompson. It's Margaret Wilson calling again. Yes, I'd like to set up that appointment to discuss my options. Sooner rather than later, if possible." I spent the next hour on the phone with Mr. Thompson, explaining my situation, detailing the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. He listened patiently, asking pertinent questions, his voice calm and reassuring. By the end of the call, I felt a sense of resolve hardening within me. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor, and I wasn't going down without a fight. "There are several legal avenues we can explore, Mrs. Wilson," Mr. Thompson said. "We can start by sending a formal letter demanding the return of your assets. If that doesn't work, we can pursue legal action to recover your funds." He explained the intricacies of gift tax, the possibility of proving undue influence, the potential for a lawsuit. He outlined a strategy, a plan of attack. He gave me hope. As I hung up the phone, a new feeling washed over me, replacing the gnawing anxiety with a quiet determination. I looked round my small apartment, at the bare walls, the sparse furniture. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I would fight to keep it, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I had a plan now, a course of action, and I knew deep down that Susan and David were in for a very unpleasant surprise. The next day, I received a text message from Susan. "Mom, we've been thinking. Maybe we could come over for Thanksgiving after all. We miss you." I stared at the message, a slow smile spreading across my face. They missed me, or rather, they missed my money. They thought they could sweet-talk their way back into my good graces, pretend nothing had happened. They had underestimated me. "That's wonderful, dear," I replied. "I'm so glad you'll be able to make it. I'll be expecting you at noon." I put down my phone, the smile widening. Thanksgiving dinner was going to be very interesting this year. I had a few surprises of my own planned, and they weren't going to like them one bit. I started to hum softly to myself as I began to prepare for the holiday. The apartment didn't seem so gray anymore. It felt like the staging ground for a long overdue reckoning, and I, the unwitting victim, was about to become the architect of my own revenge. The plush leather of the chair in James Patterson's office felt strangely cold against my skin. I smoothed down my skirt, the crisp fabric a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside me. "I still can't believe it," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Patterson, a man whose presence radiated calm competence, offered me a reassuring smile. "Just take your time, Mrs. Wilson. Tell me everything." And so I did. I started from the beginning, the day Susan and David, her fiancé, first suggested selling my house. They'd framed it as a way to simplify my life, to downsize now that I was alone. "It's too much house for you, Mom," Susan had said, her voice full of what I'd then perceived as concern. "We just want what's best for you." David had nodded in agreement, adding, "Think of all the upkeep, Margaret. You deserve some peace and quiet." I recounted how they'd helped me find a small, comfortable apartment, assuring me it was the perfect place to start this new chapter. They'd even offered to store some of my furniture in their garage, just until you get settled. I'd been so grateful for their help, so trusting. They were so convincing, I told Mr. Patterson, my voice cracking slightly. I truly believed they were looking out for me. He listened patiently as I described the sinking feeling I'd experienced scrolling through Instagram just last week. There, amidst photos of exotic vacations and designer handbags, was a picture of my antique dining table, the one I'd inherited from my grandmother, sitting proudly in Susan and David's newly renovated dining room. The caption, punctuated with a celebratory emoji, read, "Finally finished furnishing our dream home. Thanks to David's promotion, we were able to splurge a little." David hadn't been promoted. He'd lost his job months ago, a fact I'd learned only after overhearing a hushed phone conversation between Susan and her sister. "And the money from the sale of your house, Mrs. Wilson?" Mr. Patterson asked gently, his pen poised over his notepad. I swallowed hard. "They said they would invest it for me," I explained. the shame burning in my throat. They promised it would be safe and secure, earning a good return, enough to supplement my social security and keep me comfortable. I'd sign the papers they'd put in front of me, trusting their assurances. Now, looking back, I realized how naive I had been. They even showed me some fabricated investment documents. I admitted, feeling the sting of humiliation fresh again. They had fake logos and everything. It looked so official. Mr. Patterson's expression hardened. "I see," he said, his voice low, "and you have no access to these supposed investment accounts." I shook my head. "No. Whenever I ask about it, they change the subject, or they say the market is down, and I shouldn't worry." I described the last Thanksgiving dinner I'd had with them. It was the first holiday after I'd moved into the apartment. I'd gone over expecting a warm, family meal. Instead, I was met with thinly veiled condescension. "Mom, are you sure you're comfortable in that apartment?" Susan had asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "Maybe we should look into assisted living." David, ever the charmer, added, "Wouldn't it be nice to have someone take care of everything for you, Margaret?" Their words had stung, but at the time, I dismissed them as misplaced concern. Now I knew better. They weren't worried about my well-being. They were worried I might start asking too many questions. I felt like a burden, a charity case. I confided in Mr. Patterson. They made me feel like I was lucky they were even bothering with me. He listened intently, his gaze unwavering. "So," he said finally, closing his notepad, "what do you want to do, Mrs. Wilson?" I took a deep breath, the icy grip of despair loosening its hold. A flicker of resolve, of something akin to anger, began to warm me from the inside out. "I want my money back," I said, my voice stronger now, "and I want them to know they can't get away with this." Mr. Patterson leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "Then we have some work to do." He began outlining a plan, a strategy to reclaim what was rightfully mine. He spoke of legal documents, of subpoenas, and of the possibility of recovering not just the money from the house sale, but also damages for their deceit. The Thanksgiving comments, he explained, could be construed as emotional distress, adding another layer to the case. As I listened to him speak, a sense of hope began to bloom within me. The cold fear that had been clinging to me since I discovered their betrayal started to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of anticipation. "It was a long shot," Mr. Patterson admitted, "but it was a shot nonetheless." He promised to begin the legal process immediately, starting with a formal demand letter to Susan and David. "We'll start with a strong opening salvo," he said, his eyes glinting. "Something that will make them realize they've underestimated you." He paused, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "And about that upcoming Thanksgiving dinner," he began, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. I leaned forward, my heart pounding with a strange mixture of fear and excitement. This year, Thanksgiving was going to be very different. The crisp November air nipped at my face as I stepped into James Patterson's law office. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. But the brightness couldn't dispel the chill that had settled in my bones. "Mrs. Wilson, so good to see you again," James greeted me, rising from behind his large mahogany desk. His warm smile was a welcome contrast to the knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "Please, have a seat." I settled into the plush leather chair, clutching my handbag. "Thank you, James." I took a deep breath, the scent of polished wood and old books filling my lungs. "I've been anxious, waiting for this meeting." "I understand," James said, his voice gentle. "Gathering all the necessary documentation takes time. I appreciate your patience." He leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "I've reviewed everything you've provided, the bank statements, the property transfer documents, the social media posts, everything." He paused, his gaze meeting mine. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm afraid I have some difficult news." My heart pounded against my ribs. "What is it, James?" "Just tell me." James took a deep breath. "Based on the evidence you've provided, it appears you've been a victim of elder financial abuse." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Elder abuse," I whispered, the words barely audible. "By Susan and David." James nodded grimly. "I'm afraid so." He explained how Susan and David had systematically manipulated me, using my grief and vulnerability to their advantage. He detailed how they had convinced me to sell my house, promising to help me manage my finances, only to use the money for their own lavish lifestyle. He pointed out specific instances of deception, highlighting their lies about needing financial assistance for David's supposed business ventures, the fabricated stories about medical expenses, and the blatant disregard for my well-being as they gallivanted around the world on my dime, documented meticulously on their Instagram accounts. With each word, the knot in my stomach tightened, the chill in my bones deepened. "The cruise they took to the Bahamas," I murmured, remembering the Instagram photos of Susan lounging on pristine beaches, sipping cocktails. "The new car David bought, the designer clothes." It was all. My voice trailed off, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "It was all my money." James placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "I know this is difficult to hear, Mrs. Wilson, but you're not alone. This happens more often than you think. The good news is, we have strong grounds for legal action." He outlined my options, explaining the process of filing a lawsuit against Susan and David, the possibility of recovering my assets, and the legal ramifications they could face. As he spoke, a flicker of something ignited within me. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was more like resolve, a quiet determination to fight back, to reclaim what was rightfully mine, to expose their deceit and hold them accountable for their actions. "I want to do it," I said, my voice firm. "I want to pursue legal action. I want my money back, and I want them to know that they can't get away with this." James nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "I understand, and I'll do everything in my power to help you." He picked up a folder from his desk. "I've already drafted a cease and desist letter outlining the legal action we intend to take. We'll serve it to them immediately." He explained the next steps, the legal procedures involved, and the potential challenges we might face. He answered my questions patiently, his calm demeanor a steady anchor in the turbulent sea of my emotions. As the meeting drew to a close, a thought occurred to me. "Thanksgiving," I said, a strange calm settling over me. "It's just a week away." James raised an eyebrow. Yes, it is. Is there something specific about Thanksgiving? I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. Yes, there is. Susan and David are hosting Thanksgiving dinner this year. They insisted I join them, even offering to send a car. They've been so solicitous lately, almost overly concerned about my well-being. I paused, the smile widening. I think I'll accept their invitation. James looked at me, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. I see, he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Well, Mrs. Wilson, I have a feeling this Thanksgiving is going to be one they'll never forget. He handed me a copy of the cease and desist letter. I'll be in touch, and in the meantime enjoy the show. I walked out of James Patterson's office, the crisp November air no longer feeling cold. The sun seemed to shine brighter, the world a little sharper, a little more vibrant. The chill in my bones had been replaced by a warmth, a sense of anticipation, a quiet thrill. This Thanksgiving, the turkey wouldn't be the only thing getting carved. The crisp November air chilled my apartment, a stark contrast to the warmth I'd always associated with Thanksgiving. This year, though, the holiday felt hollow, a cruel reminder of the emptiness Susan and David had carved into my life. Mom, you're just getting too old to manage a whole house, Susan had said, her voice dripping with false concern, as they'd convinced me to sell my beloved home and move into this cramped space. It's for your own good. They'd painted a picture of shared holidays, of family dinners and cozy evenings. Instead, they'd painted a picture of their own greed, using my money to feather their nest while leaving me with scraps. Mr. Henderson, the state attorney, had left just an hour ago, his words echoing in my mind. You have a strong case, Mrs. Wilson, he'd assured me. We can definitely pursue legal action to recover your assets. He'd laid out my options, explaining the complexities of fraud and undue influence. I picked up the file he'd given me, the weight of it surprisingly comforting. Inside were the documents that would unravel Susan and David's web of lies. Copies of bank statements, their social media posts flaunting designer clothes and exotic vacations, all purchased with the money they'd swindled from me. The house, my house, the one I'd poured my life savings into, was now in their name, redecorated with opulent furnishings that screamed of ill-gotten gains. They even had the audacity to post pictures of their newly renovated kitchen on Instagram. I muttered to myself, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. The memory of Susan's caption, "Finally living our dream, thanks to some smart investments," stung like a fresh wound. Those smart investments were my retirement, my security, the future I'd envisioned for myself. But not anymore. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life. I walked to the window, overlooking the bustling city street below. Thanksgiving was just days away. I imagined Susan and David already planning their lavish feast in my old house, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. They probably envisioned me alone, huddled in this small apartment, grieving the loss of my home and my independence. They think they've won, I whispered, a steely resolve hardening my gaze. They have no idea what's coming. Mr. Henderson had advised a cautious approach. Don't tip your hand, Mrs. Wilson, he'd cautioned. Let them think they're safe. will strike when they least expect it. He suggested serving them with the legal papers on Thanksgiving Day itself. A dramatic gesture, perhaps, but one that felt fittingly poetic. The image of their shocked faces as they received the legal notice filled me with a grim satisfaction. The turkey getting cold, the festive atmosphere turning sour, their carefully constructed facade crumbling around them. I could almost taste the sweet revenge. I spent the next few days meticulously planning every detail. I arranged for a process server to deliver the papers during their Thanksgiving dinner, ensuring maximum impact. I even drafted a short, pointed letter to accompany the legal documents. "Enjoy your Thanksgiving dinner," it read. "This is a taste of what's to come." I sealed the letter, a small smile playing on my lips. Then I did something unexpected. I booked a flight to a secluded island resort in the Caribbean, a place where I could escape the drama, where I could finally relax and begin to rebuild my life. I pictured myself lounging on a pristine beach, the warm sun on my skin, the sound of the waves washing away the bitterness of the past few months. On Thanksgiving morning, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the process server, confirming that the papers had been served. Target acquired. The message read. I closed my eyes, a wave of relief washing over me. I could almost hear the commotion on the other end, the accusations, the denials, the dawning realization that their game was up. I opened my eyes, a newfound lightness in my heart. I glanced at the clock. My flight was boarding in an hour. I grabbed my suitcase, a sense of anticipation bubbling inside me. This wasn't the Thanksgiving I had planned, but it was the one I needed. A Thanksgiving where I took back control, where I reclaimed my future. As I stepped out of my apartment and into the crisp autumn air, I knew that this was just the beginning. The legal battle would be long and arduous, but I was ready. I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. And as I headed towards the airport, a single thought echoed in my mind. Happy Thanksgiving, Susan and David.